A death in a great family is not a fact. It is a document. It is a line of Latin in a parish register, a physician's fee entered under attendance, a bell rung the correct number of times, and once those four things agree with one another, the woman they describe has no further standing to disagree. When the Duchess of Sarne was reported dead of a hard lying in at 3 in the morning, the household went into black by breakfast, and the heir presumptive was in the study by noon. Nobody thought to check the cart that went out through the kitchen yard at 4. She was in it, and she was breathing, and she had her daughter under her cloak. She did not scream, and she did not beg the driver. She counted the turnings. The Priory of Saint Aidan stood 11 miles inland from a cold coast, in a fold of the down where the wind came over the ridge and did not stop. A long block of flint and lime rubble with a slate roof and 31 windows, 9 of them glazed. It had been a house of women for 400 years, and was now a house of women, 22 of them, who took in what the parish sent up the hill, which was mostly foundlings. Alys Rathmell arrived there in the last week of October, in a farm cart, with a fever, a torn shift, and a child 3 days old. She was 28. She had been married at 26 to a man she had met 4 times, in an arrangement that had settled a quantity of coal-bearing land and disobliged a cousin, and she had spent the 18 months since learning that her husband was seldom at home and that her husband's cousin was seldom anywhere else. She had been sensible enough to notice, and unimportant enough not to be believed. She remembered very little of the lying in. She remembered the physician from Bristol saying, quite calmly, over her, that it was going badly, and she remembered thinking that it was not going badly at all, that she had heard the child, and that the man was saying a thing which was untrue, in a room where nobody would contradict him. Then there was a great deal of laudanum, and then there was a cart. The women at Saint Aidan asked her name, and she said Alys, and stopped, because a duchess who is dead on paper and alive in a cart has one advantage in the world, and it is that nobody is looking for her. They put her in the end cell of the West Range, 10 feet by 7, with a straw mattress, a stool, a window that let the wind in at 3 sides, and no fire, because the fuel for the West Range was accounted for, and there was nothing accounted for her. There was no key in the door. She did not want one. The child was small and would not take the breast, being 3 days old and having been carried 11 miles in a cart. And the house had a way of feeding such children, which was a pap boat of glazed earthenware, yellow, cheap, made at a pottery down on the coast, and there were 9 of them in the infirmary press. Alys had spent 4 years as a girl in her father's dispensary, weighing and writing, and she had a hard, unfashionable memory for the things men had told her not to bother her head about, and one of them was what a soft lead glaze does when you keep sour milk standing in it. She would not use the boat. She took a horn spoon out of the kitchen, an ordinary one, 6pence, the bowl worn thin along the left edge from somebody's thumb, and she fed her daughter with it, a drop at a time, for 11 days, sitting up, through 2 fevers of her own. Nobody noticed, and nobody was meant to. Mother Clemence noticed in the spring. She was 61, thin as a fence post, and she had buried foundlings at Saint Aidan for 38 years, at a rate she had long ago stopped calling anything but the will of God. She stopped Alys in the cloister on a wet morning in April. "You do not use the boats." "No, mother. You have been here 5 months, and you have fed 4 of the weak ones with a spoon, and all 4 are alive. And last year we had 11, and we kept 3. Clemence's eyes went over her without any warmth in them at all. "You are a gentlewoman. You came up that hill in a cart, and you have never once told us from where, and you scrub the infirmary floor, like somebody who has done it before, which you have not. That is all true," Alys said. "I am not going to explain any of it." "Then explain the spoon." So she explained the spoon. She explained what a glaze is, and what happens to a soft one under acid, and that milk goes acid in a warm room in 4 hours, and that the boats stood on the shelf from one feed to the next, with the last feed still in them, and that this was not wickedness, It was simply what everybody had always done. Clemence heard her out with her hands inside her sleeves and did not thank her. "You may have the infirmary book," she said. "Mind you write in it, and mind you write in ink, and mind you do not tell me what God intends." That evening, two of the sisters told Alys to her face that she was giving herself airs, and that a woman who would not say her own name had no business with the register, and one of them said, not quietly, that they all knew what sort of woman arrives at midnight with a baby and no husband. "You are probably right," Alys said. "You are certainly not wrong about the midnight." Then she took the book to the end cell and sat on the stool with her cloak on and read 4 years of it by one tallow candle, and the child slept in a drawer at her feet, and she began, for the first time since the cart, to want something. Ivo Rathmell, 6th Duke of Sarne, spent the following 18 months being told that grief takes people differently. He was 39. He was heavy through the shoulders and walked with the left knee stiff from a fall on a lead road at Whitcliffe when he was 24, and a second son with nothing to lose but a horse. He had inherited at 32, married at 37 because his lawyers required it, and he had been in Northumberland on estate business when the express came, and he had ridden 4 days and arrived to a house in black and a sealed coffin, and a cousin who had already moved the study chair. He had not loved her. He had barely known her, and that was the thing that sat in him and would not dissolve. Then, in March of the 2nd year, a clerk at the coal office sent up a quarterly account with a note about a payment that had gone out of the Sarne Charities to a religious house at Saint Aidan, £11 a quarter, begun in the November of her death, and countersigned by Mr. Craik. Ivo had never given a farthing to a religious house in his life. He asked what it was for. He was told it was an old bequest. He looked, and it was not an old bequest, and it had started 9 days after the funeral. He went himself. He rode the last 11 miles rather than take the chaise, in rain, and the priory came up out of the down grey and low and shut, with a wall round it, and one gate, and a bell on a chain. With a woman who came to the grill was Mother Clemence, and she looked at a very large wet man on a horse, and did not open anything. "This is a house of women. I am the Duke of Sarne. That accounts for the horse. It does not account for the hour. I am told my money has been coming here for 18 months. Money comes here from a good many people who would rather not be written to," Clemence said. "You may come as far as the outer parlour, and no further, and you may take off your hat." He took off his hat. He sat in a cold room, with a table and 2 stools for 40 minutes, while she satisfied herself about something, and he did not ask what, because he had learned in the north that impatience is a thing other people can spend. And then the door at the far end opened, and a woman came in with a child of about 18 months on her hip, and a horn spoon in her free hand, because she had been feeding somebody with it, and she stopped in the doorway. Ivo Rathmell stood up. He looked at his wife, whose funeral he had paid for, and at a child with his own mother's straight black brows, and his hands were entirely steady, and his voice was not there at all. "Alys," he said. "Yes," she said. "Sit down. Your knee is on the wrong side of the draught, and this will take an hour." It took rather more than an hour. She told it flat, in order, the way she had rehearsed it in the end cell for 18 months, against the day somebody asked, the physician's certificate, the laudanum, the cart, the 11 miles. She told him that she had written to him 3 times in the first year, and that all 3 had gone down the hill by the Priory carrier to the receiving house at Malting, and that the receiving house at Malting was in the gift of the Sarne estate, and that Mr. Craik had held the appointment to it since the November of her death. She did not weep, and she did not say that she had waited. He asked why she had not simply walked out of the gate and presented herself at a magistrate's, and she said, "Because a woman who is dead on paper and walks into a courtroom is a mad woman until somebody rich says otherwise, and because the child was safer buried. I am not being noble. I am being poor. I had a spoon and a fever." Ivo did not go home. He wrote to his own man of business and to nobody else, and he took a room at the inn at the foot of the hill for the first fortnight, and then, because the priory had a range of ruinous outbuildings and the rain was coming through the infirmary roof in 4 places, he stayed and had it stripped and relaid, and paid for it out of his own pocket, and Clements let him, because a roof is a roof. They did not live in the same building for 7 months. What they did instead was work in the same one. Alys had the infirmary book by then and had 4 years of it in her head, and she went at it the way her father had gone at a dispensary ledger, which is slowly, in ink, and from underneath. She wrote down every death by month, by age, by cell, and by the woman who had charge of the feeding. She found that the deaths clustered in the warm months and in the 2 rooms nearest the kitchen, and not at all among the 4 children she had fed herself, and she wrote it out plainly and gave it to Clements, and did not argue when Clements put it in a drawer for 6 weeks. Then she found the other thing. The priory bought its milk from a farm at Hallow Bottom at 9p the gallon, when the market at Malting was 5p, and its bread through the same carrier at a penny over, and it had bought 9 dozen glazed pap boats and pots in 4 years from a pottery on the coast at 8p, when a plain unglazed one was 2p, and the whole came to something above £240, and every order in 4 years had gone through the same carrier and the same receiving house. Ivo sat on a stool in the infirmary, with his stiff leg out straight, and read her columns, and did not speak for a long time. In the 11th week he said, "You have known this since June. I have known the arithmetic since June. I have known who since August." She put the spoon down on the table between them. "I have been waiting for him to come up the hill, because he will, and I would rather he did it while there is somebody here who cannot be told to be quiet." He laughed then, one rough, startled sound, as though something rusted had been turned over, and looked as surprised by it as she was. The storm came off the sea in the 3rd week of January, and it came at night. The down above the priory shed its water all at once into the old stone culvert that ran under the west range, and the culvert had been silted for years, because nobody's account had ever been asked to pay for it, and at 1:30 it backed up and came into the infirmary through the floor. There were 9 children in that room, and 4 of them under 2 years old. Alys was in it within a minute, and Ivo behind her with a lantern. The water was 3 inches and rising and black with hill silt, and colder than anything. "Leave the beds," she said. "Take the children." They took them out 4 at a time into the refectory, which was up 2 steps and dry, and the sisters came in their shifts and took them, and then Alys went back for the press, and got the medicines out on her hip before the bottom shelf went under, and Ivo went out into the yard with 2 lay brothers and a crowbar, and found the culvert mouth under a foot of standing water, and could not shift the grating with his hands. Ivo. It was the first time she had used it, the wall by the wash-house, the old sluice. There is a stone in it that has been loose since Michaelmas, and if you take it out, the water goes into the orchard, and not into us. He took it out. He took it out with a crowbar and his shoulder, and the bad leg went from under him twice on the flags, and the water went sideways with a noise like a door coming off, and the level in the infirmary stopped rising within 4 minutes and began to fall. They found each other in the refectory at 3 in the morning, both soaked to the chest, and there were 22 women and 9 children in that room, and every one of them watching, and he took her hands and turned them over and looked at the palms, which were torn across from the shelving, and did not say anything for a while. "It is nothing," she said. "It is not nothing. It is gravel." He took a clean cloth off a stack somebody handed him, and cleaned the grit out of her hands 1 finger at a time, kneeling on a wet flagged floor, which cost his knee a great deal, and Mother Clements stood in the doorway with a lamp, and watched a duke do it, and said not 1 word. Mr. Craik came in March. He came with a solicitor and a physician, and an affidavit, and he came in through the outer parlour, with his hat still on, and he was 44, and pleasant-looking, and had been waiting 18 months for exactly this. "Your Grace," he said, "I shall be direct, since somebody must be. This woman is not the late Duchess. She is a person of the coast, with a strong resemblance and a stronger motive, and she has been imposing upon your grief since the summer. I have Dr. Ferron's certificate, sworn and registered. I have the burial, and I have a great deal of sympathy, which I will exchange for an annuity and silence, because the alternative is a suit that will put your name and that child's before the whole of England. Ivo came up off the stool with something dangerous in his face. Alys put 2 fingers on his sleeve. "Sit down," she said. "This will not take long." She went to the table and turned round with the infirmary book and 4 loose papers. "Mr. Craik, before we come to my resemblance, this house has bought milk at 9p against a market of 5p, bread at a penny over, and 9 dozen lead-glazed feeding vessels at 8p against 2p, for 4 years, all through 1 carrier and 1 receiving house, and it comes to £241. The receiving house at Malting is in your gift, and has been since the November my funeral was paid for." She laid the papers down and turned them so the room could read them. "The Sarne charities have paid £11 a quarter to this priory since 9 days after that funeral, countersigned by you, which is a curious way to pay for a woman who is in the ground. Dr. Ferron's fee for attendance that November was 4 guineas. His fee entered in your private account 11 days later was £200, and it went through the Bristol Bank into an annuity, and the Michaelmas payment on it was stopped in October by His Grace's man of business, which I imagine is why the doctor is standing in the doorway looking at his boots." The solicitor examined the floor with great attention. Ambrose, the lay porter, stood at the back with his hands folded and did not move an inch. "You are a woman with a spoon," Craik said. "I am," Alys said. "I was cheaper than looking, and it has cost your family a great deal more than it cost mine. The gate is behind you. Mind the sill. It's swelled in the flood, and nobody has taken a plane to it." Nothing was prosecuted, because Alys asked that nothing be, and Ivo never entirely understood it, and never entirely stopped thinking about it. Ferrand surrendered his license and went to Ireland. Craik was given 400 a year, on the single condition that he never again hold an appointment in anybody's gift, and he took it, which was the part that told against him most in the county. The bishop's court restored her in 11 weeks on the strength of the papers, and the horn spoon was not mentioned once in the proceedings, which Alys thought was the only real injustice in the whole business. He asked her in April, in the outer parlour, with the book open between them. He did not kneel, because the knee would not have it, and because kneeling would have made it about him. "I have a house you have never slept in, a knee that predicts weather, and 18 months of a marriage I was not present for," he said. "Every part of that is already yours, and none of it is a reason." "Then name terms," she said, "because I would rather be asked for something useful than apologized to." She named 3, that the culvert be dug out and relined, and that Saint Aidan be given the milk and bread contract at market price in writing, and not in charity, since a gift can be withdrawn, and a contract cannot. That the 9 dozen glazed boats go into the lime pit, and that every foundling house within 40 miles be written to, and told plainly why, because a thing that lives in one woman's head dies with the woman, and that no death in any house of his ever again be entered in a book without somebody outside the family seeing the body. 4 years on, the infirmary at Saint Aidan lost 1 child in a year, and not 11, and there was a room off it 3 mornings a week, with 4 girls in it, learning to weigh, and to write down what they had weighed, and to date it. Clemence lived to 71, and never once said she had been wrong, and left Alys her drawer key without comment, which came to the same thing. On a wet evening in October, Alys came in from the range with the book under her arm, and found the Duke asleep in a chair by the infirmary fire, with their daughter across his knee, and the horn spoon in the child's fist, the bowl worn thinner still, being used to hit a stool leg with great seriousness. And she stood in the doorway and said nothing at all, because there was nothing that wanted saying. A death in a great family is a document. It turns out that a document can be argued with, provided somebody with nothing at all keeps a fair copy of everything, in ink, for 18 months, in a cold room. If Alys counting the turnings in that cart got you the way it got me, you know what to do. Hit that like button, And send this one to somebody who believes the person nobody bothered to look for is usually the one keeping the honest record. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another of these long historical dramas, and tell me down in the comments, what was the moment you knew she had already won? Was it the spoon, the loose stone in the sluice, or the £11 a quarter? I will see you in the next one.